Hey guys, welcome to the Centre Bounce. Today we are talking about the pods, the selections under 10% ownership. Let's go. Big J, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. We're here to talk pods. I'm pretty happy. Not the ones you put in the washing machine or the dishwasher, not the ones that you talk about, although if you haven't watched it already, jump on the Supercoach Insider podcast because we were on there yesterday. We're talking about the guys. I think you said 10%. I'm pretty sure these are the pods at the moment, and it's like sub 8%. So the guys that, your grandma might pick in her team because she's read the newspaper and watched TV and was like, I like that boy. He's pretty good in my team. But, there's a lot of value. There's a lot of players who I think are going to make us a lot of cash or score really well. You just have to determine if you're going to be good enough to bring them in. It is a risk. You are, dodging the trend. There is a reason why Tom Green is something like 30 or 40% owned. So if you can take it, don't fill your whole team with these players. But if you can take it, pick 2 or 3 and watch other people scramble to bring them in throughout the year.
Yeah, because I'm sure you guys would have seen our interview with JP, the winner of last year. It was an amazing honor to have him on the channel. We had so much fun filming with him. He said back your gut. He doesn't really, in previous years, he hasn't really considered the ownership of someone. He's looked at a person, looked at their role and their stats. That's all he cares about. In terms of ownership, it's not the biggest deal. You got to back your gut and try and have some fun. Play this game the way that you want to play it. There's nothing better, genuinely, there is nothing better than picking someone that is hardly owned and then watching everyone scramble to try and get them in because you saw it before anybody else did. It is so good, and that's what I'm hoping happens with my boy Setterfield, Big J. That's what I'm hoping. We're not going to talk about him today because I want to keep him as low ownership as possible. So we're talking about other people today.
Mate, if it doesn't work out, I'm going to hear it for 3 weeks until you trade him out and be like, Big J, Setterfield scored a 20. I'm so sad. Next week, oh, he scored a 50. He's on the rise. Next week, oh, he got injured. -2. There goes my season. So, sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. As Joe says, stick with your gut. We're just here to provide you the information today.
That's exactly right. And so we'll start with some people in the back line who we're going to go line by line, just a few people from each line who have really low ownership. And I guess we'll start with Dan Houston, the burn man. We did a player review on him here on the channel, and he's 545K. He's only in 1% of teams, and he scored a 72 Supercoach points on the weekend. Obviously nothing to sing home and scream about, but then again, Port have not had the most promising start to this season, have they?
No. Port Adelaide sucked so bad in that preseason game. They got smashed. I'd be pretty sad if I was a Port Adelaide fan right now, but I'm a North fan and we've got their first round pick. So thanks, guys. But Dan Houston does really well off the halfback flank, and he was chosen in that role in the preseason game. I don't have the heat maps on me, but he might have got moved around a bit. I think just in general, though, if he's playing in the back line, he's a good shout. I know 1% of teams is crazy. If you've got enough guts, pick him up. He's definitely worth a position in your side. Awkward price at mid 500K, but you could do a lot worse.
You could, but you can certainly do a lot better. And that's the thing. You want to start off your team on absolute fire. I think he's at 1% for a reason. But if you really think that this guy is capable of dominating off halfback, he had 25 disposals to end up with 72 points. You know what I mean? So it's not like he didn't find the ball. He had the pill, but it's probably not very clean with it. He only had 68% disposal efficiency that game. So if you think there's definitely upside in relation to him, so keep an eye out on him in this first 2 weeks.
Definitely true, guys. Who's up next, Joe?
Up next, we've got the $460,000 Ed Richards from the Bulldogs. Really unfortunate, this guy. I mean, there was just as some people were starting to get some attention into this guy could be decent. He then goes and gets injured very early in the game against your mob, North Melbourne. He's only at a 1% ownership, and he only scored the 26 Supercoach points. I think he was injured in the first quarter. It's an interesting story. He's very highly linked to what happens with Bailey Dale, right?
Yeah. So Ed Richards last year, it's been well talked about kind of his last, 8 or so games run in that back line. Obviously did really well, scored quite a lot. So it's more just dependent on what happens with the halfback role. As you say, does Richards stay in that role? Does Dale go to more of a wing type position? I know they're looking for replacements from Hunter and then Dunkley, so guys could move from the wing to more inside. There's definitely potential there. There was a lot of talk about him maybe up until a couple of weeks ago. A few people had him in their teams. Other people were speculating, that kind of thing. Comes in at the real good price of, just under 500K. So similar to a Sinclair last year, guys who maybe weren't uber primo who could move into that status. Just depends on the Bevo effect, really. Yeah,
because this guy is capable of scoring in a really interesting way. I mean, he scored 26 points, subbed out, out of the game in the first quarter. He only had like 4 disposals and 3 marks. You know what I mean? Like he's able to mark the ball, and he's really clean with his disposal. He's a fantastic kick. And I think they realized that him being more of a distributor of halfback, using that beautiful kick into the midfield, was really beneficial to them. So there is a lot of upside for this guy scoring. One of the biggest knocks on him, and I find it interesting I use the word knock because it's got the corky. One of the biggest knocks on him is, sorry, Ed, I apologize making fun of your expense. But he's if he could take some kick-ins, it would mean so much more to him as a player. And that might be the biggest reason why not many people are on him. If he was able to make his way into that kick-in role, I think we'd get a lot more attention.
Yeah, 100%. Just a wait and see. If you're ballsy enough, you can keep him. Just make sure you try and have some cash left over. Come round 3. If the pick doesn't work out, if you're not confident, go for like a Ridley or someone with some extra money in the bank.
Yeah, exactly. I guess we'll move to the guy that we mentioned, Bailey Dale. He's also a player at this point. He's in 4% of teams. He's $561,000, and the guy went big. He scored 124 Supercoach points. Now, is it a coincidence that you have Ed Richards go down really early with injury, and all of a sudden you got Bailey Dale going 120 plus, Big J? Do we see a coincidence here?
Oh, man. I had this guy last year. I think I picked him up around 6 or 7 and really enjoyed kind of a few 100-plus games. But it was the rise of Richards. It was the rise of a few other players in that back line who kind of pushed Dale out. I think halfback flankers started to get tagged at the same time as well. So it is something to worry about. North Melbourne, we're not the greatest team. A lot of players on that Dogs team did dominate. But in saying that, Bailey Dale is a fantastic player. He is exceptional. He is so underrated in the AFL community and in the Supercoach community as well. I'm penciling this guy to probably be in the top 10 range. So picking him up as a pod to start with is someone that, like we saw last year with Sinclair, if he comes off with a bang, people are going to be scrambling to bring this guy in, and you're going to have him to start with.
Yeah, personally for me, I wouldn't go him. I understand where you're coming from, but if Ed Richards ends up, coming up and playing in round 1, I can't imagine that Bailey Dale is going to have that consistency with, with Richards there, because like we've mentioned, Richards is a really great player and a great ball user. A guy like Bailey Dale tends to be not so much a precision kick, but more so a meters gain sort of player. I mean, 670 meters gain is really, really good. So, look, there's definitely every chance that he could be a top 8. But personally, I think he's more of an upgrade target for myself, as mentioned. This guy is a really interesting one, the one that we're about to talk about, and one that I don't think many people had him in consideration until the Zach Williams injury, and that's Adam Saad. 567K defender, 3% ownership. I think it was definitely less than that before the Williams injury news, but I think some people have realized that there's a lot of upside to this guy.
Yeah, he didn't do so well in the Swans Blues game. I think maybe just because the back line, struggled quite a lot. But historically, without Williams in the team, the guy's pumping out like 105s. And he's priced at something like a 90, 97. So there is potential there for him to grow. You know, we've always talked about the back line being a set of maybe 5 players who are keepers already. Doherty, Stewart's, Sinclair, Sicily, that kind of thing, and Dawson. So being able to pick, you know, the guys who are 6, 7, 8 is really worthwhile here. Saad could definitely be that. If he keeps up that scoring without Williams, then he will be that kind of player.
Yeah, exactly. He had the 15 touches on the weekend for 65 Supercoach. It's obviously not ideal if you're paying up, just 567K. It's not cheap. You want someone to really go bang, and he only had 80% disposal efficiency. So it's an interesting one. I think there's definitely upside, and he will get the lion's share of the kick-ins now with if as long as Dawson will have some, of course. Dawson's not going to get none, but if Dawson's Doherty, sorry, correct. Yeah, apologies. Yeah, Doherty's going to be playing more in the midfield. So if Doherty's playing in the mids, he's not going to be getting as many kick-ins. So, but there's definitely upside to this guy. Keep a strong eye on him.
It really just depends on what happens with the guys like Sincotta, what happens with Cowan across that back line. If Saad's only used for the run and carry and not the kick, there could be some point sharing there.
Yeah, correct. That's our pods in the defense. And we'll now, in the back line, we'll now move to the midfield. And this guy has, for a lot of times, had defensive DPP, but not this year. We got to wait till round 6, and that's one Lachie Whitfield, or Lachie Shitfield, as some would like to call him. 473K, 1% ownership. The dream. There's a pulse, Big J. 1% believes.
Every year, people try and find cheaper options that they think are going to do really well. Lachie Whitfield could be that player for me. He has scored off the half-back line. It's kind of his preferred position. Got moved into the forward line last year, got moved to like the wing. Probably not the greatest strengths for him, and then got knocked out. I know he hurt a lot of people last year, but at sub 500K, he's going to get DPP in the back line to start with. So if you can pick him now and hold him out till round 6, you could get an advantage over other people.
Yeah, 25 disposals of half-back. That's what you want to hear. That's what you want to see in just a pracky game. You know what I mean? With 3 tackles. So it's a great showing. And obviously in the intra club before that, he had like 34 disposals. But you can't really look too much into that. He's now sharing a half-back line with Ash and Cumming though. So it's unlikely that all 3 of them go big in any particular week. But for 473K, you could get a guy who could be pushing top 8 defense by the end of the year, So there is immense value. And if he doesn't work out, you can always downgrade him to literally any other mid-pricer or rookie, given his price. And you can use that cash to upgrade somewhere else. If a guy like Flanders or Bruin fails, you can upgrade, for example, to a Prima elsewhere. So this Whitfield pick actually offers a lot more than initially that you can tell on the surface, right?
Yeah, it just kind of depends on what happens with the guys like Cumming, what happens with a few of the other guys running off the GWS backline. I think the new coach coming in isn't going to rely on 1 or 2 players like Leon Cameron did. So just a big wait and see there. He is a cheaper price. He is a lower percentage for a reason, but the scoring potential is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone else on the Giants team that has phenomenal scoring ability is Josh Kelly. This guy... He's rocketed into contention all of a sudden. He's 582,000 and he's at 4% ownership. So more and more people are being convinced by what they've seen from this guy.
Oh, it's the preseason game. Came out it got 36 disposals, which is phenomenal, and scoring 138 Supercoach. So only got him behind, which isn't fantastic. Had a few frees against and free fours, which probably inflated his score a little bit. But there's some real people saying that, everyone's a real person, but there's some people saying that, hey, he's probably back to superstar status again. Coming back off injury, having a new coach in that team, that kind of thing at GWS, you could be picking up a 115, average player at 587K.
The scoring ability is off, but the scoring ability is off the charts because he only had 79% time on ground and he had 7 clangers. He had 7 clangers to go with his massive 138. He could have been on golden level scoring if
Yeah.
he had kicked better or been on the ground for a bit longer. It seems the
if
stars are aligning.
If he was, he would probably end up being a lot higher than 4% ownership. 17 contested possessions as well, which is crazy.
Yeah, Hopper's gone. Taranto's gone. It's him, Green, Cornelio. He's going to get all the midfield time that he needs and wants. You never know, man. His biggest issue has been a lot of inconsistency, but this could be the year. At this late stage of his career, he could end up a top 8 mid. It's ridiculous. But there's one thing to note, that preseason games always tend to have a way of inflating the scoring ability of players who are on the outside when the game isn't as contested, and people just don't take the game as seriously in the preseason. They don't want to risk an injury before round 1. That would be the worst thing possible. But he still had quite a few contested possessions. So one that I think will be higher than 4% in the next week, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the next player. HUGH McCluggage from the Brisbane Lions. 570k midfielder. He's at 2% ownership. Are you surprised that he's at 2%?
Not really. I think Brisbane's always been one of those teams where the players have to share the ball around a lot. It now used to be dominated by the Lachie Neale show. Now it's the Dunkley show. Guys like McCluggage are probably the second in line. I know with Lions kind of being out of the picture now, getting a bit older, I think he's going to be VFL instead of AFL. So McCluggage is the next one in that team to get the ball. He doesn't need a lot of disposals to actually do really well. So if we look at his stats from the preseason game, 26 disposals for 134. So I know they dominated. I know they did really well, but sub 30 disposals for a 130 is crazy. So really, really good player there, kind of coming into his stride, the right age for the team. You just have to be ballsy enough to pick him, knowing that, hey, he's going to be sharing ball with another 2 guys who should be scoring 100 every week.
It seems though, even in that preseason game, he was in that midfield with those 2 bulls that you're talking about, Dunkley and Neale, and he had more clearances than them. He had 10 clearances to his name. Dunkley had 8 and Neale had 6. So it seems that just because a guy like Dunkley or Neale are getting their first hands on the ball because they're such incredible ball winners, they're passing it out to McCluggage, who ends up getting the clearance, moving the ball forward. And he had 17 contested possessions of his own. So it seems like McCluggage is only going to flourish being the 3rd midfielder, playing that Darcy PARISH, the Zach Merrett role, letting the players like your Darcy PARISHs go in there, win the ball, feed the ball out to him, so that he can use his disposal efficiency really well. So McCluggage is a really interesting one. I don't think many people considered him, but after this game, I think you just have to really consider him. Being the 3rd frees him up.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, he's the Zach Merrett, the Jack McRae of that Brisbane team. So there's definitely scoring potential there. If you're not going to start him, definitely look to bring him in at some point if he's around the right price that you want to get him, because I think he's value.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of the Zach Merrett, I guess we can talk about Zach Merrett himself right now. He's 617,000 midfielder, of course, captain of my mighty Bombers. He's in 5% of teams, and he scored 112 Supercoach points. So that's not too bad, hey?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think his last year, his ownership was a lot higher than what it was coming off a great 2021. But I think just historically, he does a lot better in the second half of the season. So maybe people are saying, hey, I'll get him in, but I'll wait till he has, his obligatory price drop coming in there. But as you say, captain of the team, fantastic player, looked a lot better than another guy we're going to be looking at, just after this during the preseason game. But the role's always going to be there. He doesn't need to get a lot of disposals to do really well, because his chip kicks and his positioning and his ability to set up the ball as well. I think he's also kind of added goal kicking to his game. So instead of having to pass it into the forward 50, he'll now run forward and then kick it in. So it's a huge thing for midfielders now. And I think Zach Merrett's only going to score better.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he will score better because they've now got extra mouths at the coalface. They've now added Setterfield. Zach Merrett's game was never one that suited him to try and win the contested ball himself. He's very much an outside player, a lot like McCluggage, who we just spoke about before. And having an extra player in Setterfield to help the likes of Parish and Shield to try and win the ball will only help out Merrett, I think, even more, but giving him more of a chance of having first use out of the stoppage and getting more clearances, a bit like what we saw with McCluggage. So it's really impressive. And as you say, he doesn't need a lot of touches because he's so clean with the ball and he tackles. He's a tackling machine. He had 6 tackles on the weekend. So even when things aren't going his way, for example, by foot, he'll still make it up with good tackling pressure. Unlike the next guy who seemed completely disinterested.
How do you feel about Darcy Parish, Joe, coming in at 610K, 2% ownership? He did not have a great preseason game.
No.
Supercoach scoring was for the only one. Maybe someone who's currently in your Supercoach teams pushing him out. But what's your feelings on Parish?
Look, at this point, I don't know how to feel about him. I was hoping that he's had a slightly interrupted preseason with some soft tissue concern, which is probably which is the main reason why I don't have him in my starting team. I don't want to have anyone with an injury cloud over their head, and that injury cloud really was solidified because after the game there was some image of him having actually got ice on his lower leg. I think it was a calf. So, look, if he's playing that a bit underdone or with an injury cloud over his head, then I would strongly recommend that you guys don't start him at all. You don't want to be paying up 600K plus for someone who is going to not try. It's very different to Steele, I think. Steele genuinely never gives a crap in the preseason game. But in this case, he's got ice on his calf, so I wouldn't go there. I'm only hoping that this will be a benefit for a guy like Setterfield, because if Parish is under an injury cloud, you know who's going to get his lion's share of the CBAs, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's a big wait and see for me. The scoring potential's there. The accumulation potential's there. You know, guys got into preseason games with niggles, that kind of thing. He wasn't a lot of people's radars at that price because it's so juicy. But I think after the preseason game, they're like, well, maybe we'll go and pick someone else and keep him as an upgrade target. During the season, though, if he does have low ownership and he looks fit, jump on him because he will do really well for you. If he comes out and gets a couple of 40s or 50s at the start of the season, he could be a real, you know, he could end up being 500K or just under when we start to upgrade. Jump on him then and he'll be fantastic for you. Because, you know, he can play. It's not like he can't play, right? So when he's fit, if you can get him when he's not fit, when he becomes fit, hey, that's it. He's set.
Exactly. Someone who is very fit at this point in time is Tom Liberatore. Jeez. He worked his way into quite some people's teams at 3% ownership right now, 576K. And why wouldn't he be in more teams? He went 158 on the weekend against your mob. What do you reckon?
He's always been, it's interesting, kind of him and Dunkley have always kind of shared that contested ball role. I know people don't see it as much, but when you actually watch the game, it's what happens. You know, you look at scoring, Dunkley will do not so great. Liberatore will score like a 150 and vice versa there. Now Dunkley's gone. That's Lib's role at that club. We saw on the weekend, he went massive, did really well. Let's just pull up the stats. So 13 contested possessions, which is fantastic. Second most on the field for them. And just dominated, Joe. Just did so well. At sub 600K, I think he's probably the best option there at that price. I know people have got Josh Kelly, but if you can't afford a steal, if you don't want to go a Zach Merrett or a Parish, you know, you just don't have enough money to do a lot of these kind of 600K plays without jeopardizing your team, Liberatore is definitely the shout.
Yeah, and you know where he's going to be every game. He's going to be at the centre bounce, at English's feet, ready to feed the ball out to either McRae or to Bond. He is such a contested ball winner. He's always in the top 2 or 3 when it comes to contested ball and clearances. The guy's an absolute freak. And he had 8 clearances that game as well. So 33 disposals. You know, and 16 kicks for a guy that's an in and under player. To have 16 kicks is really impressive, and 2 of those kicks led to goals. So if you have a midfielder who's going 30 disposals plus and kicking a goal, geez, this is insane scoring for that price. Massive upside.
Yeah, the Dogs are moving to a much quicker ball movement style game where the midfielders will run forward into the, the 50-meter line and bang it forward. If it kicks a goal, it's even better. He will kind of rotate a little bit, I think, through that forward line just to rest because he's such a good player. But boy, oh boy, these midfielders who can kick goals are the next hotness.
Yeah, exactly. Someone who we hope will kick more goals by having more midfield time and then pushing forward is a guy like Callum Mills. But unfortunately, the horse keeps messing around with his role, and he didn't play on the weekend. 642,000, 5% ownership. I'm surprised at 5%, given that he didn't play.
Yeah. It just kind of, people know what his scoring potential is. They know that he came out last year and banged out, a 200 type score. So the potential's there. It's more just kind of what his role is. Obviously, I think we've spoken about guys who played in the preseason versus not and their selections. But if you're ballsy enough to pick him, 5% ownership at that price is bloody fantastic. He will drop in price a little bit, but I think as Sydney kind of get into those more clutch games, he will start scoring bigger. So if you can get him on the dip, even if you don't start him, it's going to be a fantastic player for teams.
Yeah, I'm hoping to buy him on the dip. I'm hoping that he can. He has a ceiling like no one else. His ceilings are astronomical, but at the same time, he makes up for that by having the occasional 60 or 70 point game. If you can get him in right after he goes for a 60 points, that would be a great time to bring him into your season. I'm in no rush to start him right now, given the uncertainty around his role. Warner getting more CBAs after that performance by Goulden. Surely he gets a bit more CBAs. And they've already mentioned that Mills he's happy to move away from the midfield if it means improving his team structure and helping them win games. He's too selfless. The guy's a superstar. You love a team full of Callum Mills, but unfortunately he's not a starting pick for me.
Yeah, for me too.
Alrighty. We'll skip the rucks because we don't really. We think the top rucks are the ones that you got to go for. We'll go straight to the forward line. We'll start with ISSAC HEENEY. Seeing as we're talking about Callum Mills, we'll talk about his fellow handsome teammate that everyone dreams about, ISSAC HEENEY, the 557,000 forward. He's got 6% ownership. One of them, JP's son.
Yeah, I love the pick. I think to start within the forward line, though, it's a little bit sketchy just because you're going to be picking Dunkley, Taranto, and Rosie. Cornelio was that other player to make the number 4. I think that's turned into Goulden now. But, boy, oh boy, this guy burnt me not having him in my team during the season. I know he did for a lot of people. And if you can keep up his scoring from last year, there's a reason why he's 557K. He didn't dominate the preseason game, but will be getting more midfield time. And when he doesn't, he's kicking goals. So, don't have him in your team at your own risk at some point.
Yeah, because Champion Data love this guy. I mean, it's hard not to. He's a very handsome, pretty man. All right, don't get me wrong. But he scored 81 off 1 goal 3. If he had kicked 4 goals 0, it's no exaggeration. He would have gone 120 plus. Yes?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this guy sneezes. He gets one handball. He has a sneeze, go to the bathroom, ends up on 30 points. So I just don't know what Champion Data are doing. I think he's like their Smokey, the guy, maybe he's Neo, messes with the algorithm, that kind of thing, and then just gets more points. But I don't know, man. He just gets more points, Joe. And he's one of those players that you're like, your opponent's got HEENEY, he's not doing that well. And then 2 minutes later, he's on 40. Well, how did that happen?
What did he do? A handball, a tackle, and all of a sudden he's up to 50. Sensational. Yeah, I don't know how he messes with the algorithm, but I hope we could somehow mess with the algorithm. Get us to 1,000 subscribers, guys, before the start of the year. All right, we'll move on to Zach Butters, the 529,000, 6% ownership player from Port Adelaide, 67 Supercoach points. It was his first hit out for the year. Obviously, he was managed. He had that bruising that he missed the game, the first intra-club, the
his AC as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So What do you reckon on Zach Butters?
He's definitely the forgotten man at Port Adelaide now, but when he's on, he's on. He's going to be the guy alongside Rosie when they're fully fit. We'll be scoring big. As I said with Heaney, I think the forward line's kind of set a little bit now, and unfortunately that's just the case. If he was sub 500k, people would still be picking him like he was last year. Don't forget about him during the season though, because he will go big, and you will get hurt if you do not have him. Potentially you could have some ruckman or something in there, but he's a definite downgrade or upgrade option for your players in that forward line.
Yeah, I agree. 16 tackles, 16 disposals, 5 marks and 2 tackles for a first game back. I think is a very promising return in a game where his team got sort of shellacked, right, by Fremantle, whose midfield is really strong up against the likes of Brody, O'Meara, Brayshaw, Sarong, and they got a dominant ruckman in Darcy who absolutely took Lycett to the cleaners. So he had a lot against him for a first game back, and he still scored 67. I think this kid is really, really talented. He's definitely one I'm going to keep an eye on. His biggest knock has always been that he always cops knocks, physical knocks from everywhere, even his own teammates. So even himself.
Walls and it's like head dives into other players' legs and all sorts, mate.
Yeah, so keep an eye on one Zachary Butters, guys. He's really impressive. And another one, you really got to keep not just one eye, 2 eyes. Keep both of them on Harry Himmelberg and his role. He's playing forward now. He's 499,000 and he's in 3% ownership. I'm surprised it's at 3% because it looks like they need him forward. But if he moves to the back line, Big J, oh boy.
Yeah, and it's one of those things as well. I know me and you picked him up at kind of that 380k mark last year. Came out and was fantastic for us for the rest of the year. Probably one of the reasons why we jumped up so much in the rankings was having Himmelberg in our sides in that back line. At the moment, he's kicking goals, right? So his scoring's probably going to drop. His price is going to drop to maybe that kind of 380k mark if he's going to keep on this trajectory scoring goals, because he's not doing a lot more. When that GWS forward line gets a lot more centered, when they get a lot more secure, he's going to move back, and boy, oh boy, he's going to score really well. So as we say with Butters, as we say with Heaney, as we say with Zach Merrett, potentially, and other guys, look for the change in role and then watch him fly up the rankings.
Yeah, I agree. They need him there. I mean, Aaron Cadman's not ready for now. And when he is ready, it could be later down the season. So he's an awesome upgrade target. So keep an eye on him. One who's not an upgrade target, one that people are really considering putting him in their starting side, is from your mob, Big J. One Jack ZIEBELL, 356k, 4% ownership.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Ben Mackay is probably not coming back to round 6 or 7 at the moment. Had a bit of a bruise injury. Had a bit of a bone injury in his foot. So he's out of the team for a while, which does force ZIEBELL to come back into that team. I was considering him not even being best 22 at the moment, but with the Mackay injury, I think he's definitely locked in there now. It's looking like he's going to take a majority of the kick-ins again. And what did he score in the preseason game? So came out and scored at 86. So even at 86, he's still going to make you some money in Supercoach. He jumps up that by a little bit more in a game where we don't get as dominated, where the opposition defenders aren't running 4 talls, and he gets kind of a couple more steps that way. He's going to do quite well for us in Supercoach. At the moment, he's not in my team, but at that price, you could be getting a keeper at 350k, or at least someone to compete with the keepers in that forward line.
He's got a great kick to handball ratio. I mean, 15 disposals, 13 of them were kicks. You know what I mean? 2 marks, 3 tackles. So he's doing the things that you want to see from someone who's playing at halfback, a distributor. You might not have considered him best 22, and he stepped down from the captaincy, so that reduced the necessity to play him every week. But now, as you mentioned, it almost seems like you've got to play him at this point. And whilst you might not have the captaincy, mantle, he's still a leader of the club, and one that this young team is still going to look towards for leadership. And when you got him calling out for the ball, you might be a goater, that's full of promise and dash. But when you've got a guy like ZIEBELL demanding the ball, you're just going to toe in line and succumb to the hierarchy, I think. So he's one that I'm still considering to start in my forward line. If just in case, if I get, if I get cold feet on a guy like Bruin or a guy like Flanders, I think it's always easier to go down than up.
Yeah, no, it's a really good option there. And even if he's only scoring 90s, a 90s valued at 450K. So comes out, scores a few 90s, gets up to that price, straight upgrade to a premium with a rookie alongside you. So,
exactly.
Can definitely do it.
A one up, one down. And at worst, we just sort of want him to, even if he floats around his value, make just a little bit of money. It's almost like a stopgap, really, waiting until you can see who the top forwards are. Wait for someone like a Gorn to get forward DPP in round 6, and then use a guy like ZIEBELL to bye-bye, off to Gorn you go.
Or if he gets backline DPP as well, could be a swing man there, good coverage, that kind of thing.
Well, yes, if you like to swing that way, it's up to you, Big J. I like to swing forwards. All right, we'll go with our last selection for this video. One, Dylan Moore, who the Supercoach Insider boys have bets riding on. 521K from the Hawks. He's at 3% ownership, and he scored 70 Supercoach points against the Pies. What do you think of Dylan Moore?
The scoring's definitely there. I think he's going to be one of those guys at Hawthorn this year. They are changing things up, and Sam Mitchell's come in, obviously, last year and made him one of those players for him. I think that's going to continue this year. So it's more just a case of, hey, can you afford him? I don't think you pick him at, over the other 3 guys that we've mentioned twice already today. But if you're looking for another option, if you're looking for an upgrade option, keep him in your mind. Say, hey, this guy's pumping out 100s every week. That could be better than a lot of our other forward options. So definitely upgrade target for me. What do you reckon, Joe?
This guy is an absolute smoky. I'm not even joking. He scored 70 Supercoach points. He did not appear after halftime.
Yeah,
he had 43% time on ground. So he only played in the first half. He kicked 2 goals and he had 15 disposals. This is very, very, very impressive, if I might say so myself. I don't want to be Benny Boy, but then again, I don't think he's going to get 50% CBAs. That's the biggest problem. I don't think he's going to get 50% CBAs, but he could well and truly rotate through there, especially as the year progresses. They have a young on-ball brigade. They have a very young midfield, and young players tire out. They don't run out the whole season. So there's every chance that Dylan Moore gets more midfield time as the season progresses. And if his floor is playing forward, kicking 2 goals and scoring 70.5, then my word, he is one that you might have to upgrade to earlier than you think.
And he'd be one of those guys as well that's probably going to get DPP just in the amount of contested possessions and CBAs he did get. I reckon he's kind of set up for that as well.
He had 7 contested possessions.
Yeah, it's only 35% in the midfield, so it's not a huge amount, guys. A lot of these guys are going to be getting, if they're rotating through multiple positions, like we're seeing this year, a lot of people are going to be getting DPP.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings our discussion of all of these pods across the lines to a close. Thank you so much for listening and watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed the content. We're on our way to 1,000. We are really close, Big J. People are liking what they're seeing, and we're really glad about that.
Yeah, and remember, guys, we've got a lot of, we've got a week to go in Supercoach. That's a lot of videos we've got coming out. We've got some pretty crazy things. Got a few more guests coming on the show. Definitely subscribe. Worth a watch.
And get involved with our group. Subscribe here. Like us on Twitter. And get involved with our group. If you come number 1 in that group, you get a jersey with a number of your choice, which is obviously sensational value. If you get the highest score for the week, in any week in the season, you get to win a couple of tickets to a game. And if you're lucky, you're no good, but you just came to have some fun and you won the lottery, you also get an AFL store voucher. So there's nothing to lose, guys. Free is good.
Yeah, we love free. And remember, guys, here at the Centre Bounce, we do the hard work so you don't have to. Bye for now.
Bye.